Welcome to This Week in Local, a Localogy podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Localogy analysts Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Local. I'm Charles Laughlin, Senior Analyst at Localogy, joined by my colleague Mike Boland. Mike, how's it going today?
Hey, Charlie, going well.
Great. So what's on your mind?
So, Charlie, you may remember early in the sort of Gen AI craze, which also coincided with early in like this podcast. It was like the second or third episode. We started to talk about like, what is this new crazy thing everyone's talking about, generative AI? And I think you may remember one of the things, like you asked me a question, like who's the potential disrupted parties and all this? Like, what does this disrupt? And we sort of went back and forth on that. But one of the things we talked about was like, just sort of traditional like aspects of the marketing stack, everything from stock images to like other just like sort of tools that like brand marketers or SMB marketers have at their fingertips to like generate images or generate web pages or all that. So since then, we've really seen that play out with things like copywriting assistants that are provided by companies ranging from like web.com to like even Google helping SMBs like work on some of the rote aspects of their SEO workflows, like come up with meta descriptions for their pages. So anyway, the last domino to fall has happened in the last few weeks with two announcements that sort of signal to me a trend. And it is both Amazon and Google launching these sort of generative AI product image generators or tools for people to easily generate the product images that go on either their like, product listings in Google Shopping or their product pages in Amazon. And they have these sort of interesting common elements to them. And again, there were two announcements made in as many weeks. So I'll mention them each briefly in some of the details. So first with Amazon, it launched this AI image generation tool. As its name implies, it helps, non-media savvy sellers and advertisers, generate professional looking product images for their listings or their ads. And it works similarly to the flavors of generative AI that we all sort of know and are most popular, which are, keyword prompts that generate some sort of image. So what these both Google and Amazon, what they're doing here mostly focuses on the backgrounds of these images. So what you do as a sort of merchant is you upload your product image, and then, so Amazon has the image, and then you say, okay, I want a background, and you can sort of just like rattle off keyword prompts like thematic things like, beach or kitchen or like autumn or sunset, things like that. You get the point. Like you just basically put your product in these settings in this very Gen AI oriented way. And then it spits out these, snazzy product images you can use. So that's Amazon's. Google's is very similar. Google is calling it, I forget what it's calling it. Oh yeah, Product Studio. It's AI powered Product Studio. Similar concept. You upload an image, and then with keyword prompts, you can work on just various, thematic backgrounds. And, with Google's, it's interesting too, in addition to adding backgrounds, you can take away backgrounds. So if you have a product with just distracting backgrounds, you can replace it with something that's just like a, modern color gradient or, whatever you want to do. So one of the benefits here that both companies are touting is that not only does this sort of up-level the sort of non-digitally savvy merchants out there by just giving them this more powerful tool for professional photos, but it also can save some time and money in terms of like getting more mileage out of just like one single photo that you can make like infinite variants and avoid having to do costly sort of photo reshoots. You can use the same one for like seasonal variants throughout the year, for example. So anyway, like I said, latest domino to fall in AI's continued sort of conquest of the marketing stack. Both these products are going to be out in the next few months, and we'll be watching them closely.
Okay, a couple quick reactions, Mike. First, is this a Canva killer in a way? Because it sounds like what you just described is what I would currently use Canva for.
Yeah, that's a good point. And back to that like earlier discussion we had like a year ago, one of the places I said that could be disrupted is like Getty Images, right? Like the
Right.
stock photo libraries. You bring up another point, one step further, not just, just the raw photos, but the tools people currently use to do just like, variations and graphic design. Canva's done a great job democratizing graphic design.
Yes.
Now they could be the disrupted party. They were once the disruptor. You're right. Something like this could take the place of a Canva type product, or Adobe's Creative Cloud, like Photoshop and other sort of things in that
Sure.
stack as well. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. The other just observation, I guess, is the red line here, or the line in the sand, the product image itself, because there's brand association with that. So you're talking about uploading an actual product image and building
Yeah.
around it with generative AI. What about the product image itself? What's going to happen
Yeah.
with that?
So no, you're right. I mean, that's like the raw ingredient. You at least need that as a starting point. You can't just like start from nothing.
Right.
But the point is, I think it's still accessible to anyone in that someone could take a picture of their product, on a table or just in any sort of context with their iPhone, and then they have that, and then they upload that. So I think you can start with even a basic thing you can do in your own, business environment, or like just put a white sheet behind it, or you get the point. Anyone can just take the picture, and then they have that basic ingredient to then launch them into this new workflow that these Google and Amazon are offering.
Okay, cool. So I would say switch gears, but my thread this week also has an AI angle, a different one. And what kind of prompted me to think about this was I read an article in Forbes that featured an interview with Chamath Palihapitiya, the all-in podcast guy, the social capital guy, former Facebook exec. Mike, and I may recall, I think he actually was at some conferences that you and I produced back in the day.
Yeah, he was at Google and Facebook, and was a frequent guest at some of those,
Yeah,
mid 2000s, aughts conferences.
and I remember struggling with his name then. So,
Yeah, right.
but at any rate, he had something really interesting to say, which is that we talk. Actually, we don't really talk. We kind of talk around sort of the dark angles around AI, and particularly around disruption of professions. Will it be lawyers? Will it be marketing copywriters, financial advisors, or whatever? What group is going to be disrupted by AI? And he raised something very interesting, which kind of fits into a broader context of how AI automation is driving efficiency in launching new companies. If you spend any time on TikTok or Instagram, it's one person after another saying, I use ChatGPT to launch a business and blah, blah, blah. So what he's saying essentially is that in the near term now and going forward, two people can start a software company using AI to automate pretty much anything you can think of. And that two-person company can remain a two-person company a lot longer than it might otherwise. And in that instance, it raises a serious question of how necessary is VC money, at least in the early stages. Maybe when you're trying to scale, you're still going to need people, but you're not going to need to add all these teams of developers, marketers, and so on as early as you would, or maybe not at all. And he said that kind of suggests that VC may become less important in the near term. And I thought that was really interesting because, we've read about all these different disruptions that are going to happen or may happen. This is the first time I saw that venture capital was on the chopping block as well. And Mike, I don't know if that strikes you as plausible or not.
Yeah, Chamath, always the provocateur, even like, sort of predicting the demise of his own industry. That's on brand for him. But also on brand for him and social capital. This reminds me of something that, he has always tried to push, and really was on this kick maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and still continues to do it, which is to take aspects of venture capital, and not just the investment, but what comes after that. When you have a sort of portfolio of companies, have certain sort of repeatable or standardized or productized sort of operational functions and tools that you can sort of apply across the board. So not only providing funding, but also providing all of the functional aspects of that business that can be standardized and productized, to take that off the plates of the the founders so they can focus on what they do best and not be bogged down in things like HR functions, which was sort of, it made a lot of sense at the time. That's always stuck with me as like VCs should, and they sort of do to some degree help open doors for their portfolio companies and help them form deals. But this really just, the idea was like software, like each VC should have proprietary software that they sort of support their portfolio companies with on operational levels. Now, the reason that reminds me of what he's talking about now is that he's supporting the idea of his portfolio companies, or I guess maybe he's speaking more generally about any funded business.
He seemed to be,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that they can basically operate in a leaner way, and it's congruent with like the sort of lean startup, and they can be a lean startup longer, to your point, when they reach some of those phases of growth where they would suddenly have to need capital to ramp up in terms of headcount. Maybe they can sort of hold off on that and remain operationally efficient for longer. And I think it's interesting. I think he has a point. I mean, we're constantly looking at where AI is going to take over, where it's not. There's always the question of like, what aspects of knowledge work is it going to take over? I think that
Right.
that sort of gets into what we're talking about here when it comes to, um, development, software development. So what aspects of software development can be, automated with AI?
Well, his point kind of touches on the full spectrum, because it's, how is AI helping people build products? How is AI helping people acquire customers,
Yep.
tell the story, tell their story, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think he's saying that VCs will be replaced by AI, but they'll be made less necessary by AI. It's a slight difference.
Yeah.
But I think the outcome is sort of the same. Whether he's right or not, who knows? But well, we'll find out, I think, fairly soon. But I think this idea that, that seed stage may not be necessary or as necessary, or maybe even through Series A or whatever stage, they'll be able to scale. I don't know if it means they can scale without funding. I'm not sure that's what he's saying. But it seemed to be saying that the early stage investing may become less and less important.
Yeah. And I think he probably feels confident enough saying this that there will always be sort of demand for, capital.
Right.
And I think he's talking about a certain sort of segment of businesses that might be able to either get by without it or at least push it off into the future a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's still going to be, I think, a class of like, high growth businesses that like him and his sort of profession aren't really in
Right.
danger of. Yeah.
I didn't infer that he's predicting $1 billion company with only 2 employees.
Yeah. Right.
That'd be interesting, but I'm not
That
sure
would
that's
be
what he was
very
saying.
interesting in
Yeah.
terms of just like the capital requirements go way down and the margins go way up if
Yeah.
someone can pull that off.
And the wealth creation opportunities are exponentially larger.
Yeah.
But
And if you
yeah.
think about that, that's the next evolutionary step in software and SaaS, if you think about it. Like the reason why SaaS has been such a, investor darling
Yeah.
over the past decade is, one, because of the predictable recurring revenues.
Right.
I mean, that's great. But also just like software economics when it comes to
Credible
you're
scalability.
shipping.
Yeah.
Scalability and it's bits rather than atoms.
Right.
So the capital requirements are like a lot less in terms of just all
It's
the
like
logistics.
the whole logic of it's always better to sell a digital versus a physical product.
Yeah. So this takes that to the next level in terms of how much more can you actually scale with less.
Right.
And it's an intriguing thought.
Yeah. So let's pivot over to who won the week. My entry is, it's still in the same theme, and a company called NVIDIA that I think most of us have probably heard of has launched something that's kind of interesting, and they call it, they call it an AI foundry. And essentially, this is a solution that lets companies, whether they're startups or enterprises, as long as they're deployed on Microsoft Azure, build their own custom generative AI solutions. So it's just, I think this kind of broadly fits into something we're going to be seeing more of, whether it's in AI or just software generally, which is sort of platforms that companies are offering as a way for companies to build their own products without bringing in big dev teams and so on and so on. AI is going to be a big part of that. I wrote something earlier this week about Visita launching something like this. It wasn't AI specific, but it was kind of like a dev platform that you can use in lieu of using your own resources, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I thought this was just very interesting. Anyway, I don't know what you got, Mike.
Yeah. So and Nvidia is killing it. I mean, they
Sure.
started in GPUs and has rode the wave of gaming and graphics production in
Yep.
general, and now is just expanding into all these other
Riding every
hypercores.
wave, right?
They just continue to ride every wave. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, part of that story involved Azure. So speaking of Azure and Microsoft is my Who on the week because they made a move this week at their big Build conference that essentially takes many disparate generative AI sort of programs that they have, which have already been successful. They were out front of conversational AI with things like Bing Chat and lots of other sort of orbiting parts. They've really sort of federated that and brought it under one focused sort of brand. This is mostly a branding play, but it's also an integration play. So all of those disparate pieces are now under the umbrella of Copilot. So
Right.
Bing Chat will, going forward, be known as Copilot, and some of those other just, again, orbiting parts are going to be Copilot. And then along with that, not only is they won the week just for, I think, a strong sort of move to federate all of that, but also some stats they mentioned in the same breath were that Forrester predicts that 6.9 million U.S. knowledge workers will be using some form of this Copilot product
Right.
in 2024, and they're predicting 10 billion in annualized revenues by 2026, and that's a third-party Forrester projection, not a Microsoft projection.
Right. So Microsoft may have a bigger number. Who knows?
Yep. Yeah. Right.
Any rate, Mike, you want to read us out?
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been This Week in Local. Stay tuned every week for more episodes. You can find the show on all major podcast networks and find out more at localogy.com. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Your engagement helps others find us. And if you're interested in being a guest or sponsor, you can email us at podcast@localogy.com. So I'm Mike Boland with Charles Laughlin. Our producer is Dara Sweat. So thanks for listening and see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Localogy's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.